This video is going to be a little bit different from my usual content. In a recent video showing the P47, I had a bit more commentary over my dogfights, and due to some recent changes in my hardware making it a bit more difficult to screen capture when I'm flying, I decided I would take that principle forward and cut down a series of engagements that I've had over a couple of weeks with a bit of commentary over the top explaining what I'm doing. All of these sorties were flown on the Storm of War server. They were originally flown in VR, but then I've replayed the track with Track IR to get the screen images for you. I've also enabled the labels in some of the videos. It just makes it a bit easier to see what's going on. When I originally flew them, there were no labels and no external views. So enjoy this, something slightly different. If the format is enjoyable, then this might be something I do a bit more often in the future. This engagement here is not a particularly complex one. We're flying along here. You can see my wingman off my right wing there, and another one is just behind. There's three of us. Up at 6,700 meters or so, and we spot an aircraft off to our east. And as you can see from the labels that I've turned on, that is a Spitfire over there. Now he's a bit lower than us. I had not seen him at this point. My wingman had seen him. So we turned east and started a shallow dive, and I think I picked him up visually about now. So we've got a good height advantage, but we don't have an ID at this point. So we're just diving straight down towards this incoming contact to get an ID. And I think it's about this point where I could just work out that it had stripes. So he's about to fly straight underneath me here. There's the Spitfire coming up underneath me, and I tried to get some shots away by pushing the nose forward and firing out in front of him, and I don't think I hit. Those shots seem to have just gone past his right wing. So I pulled the nose up and went into a high right climbing turn, and you can see the Spitfire is now dropping away behind. Had I been that Spitfire, I would have instantly just rolled inverted, dived straight for the deck, flown north for the cover of the flak at my friendly airfields, and then tried to climb away and start all over again. But this guy, I think he thought he'd lost us at this point, because he just levels off heading back to the east. He's now directly underneath my nose in almost level flight. I have the height advantage, I have the airspeed, I have wingman, so I push the throttle to about 1.4 ATA, and it's just a matter of keeping a very gentle descending right turn going. I'm a little bit out of trim here. A touch of left rudder would have helped, but we're doing 600 by this point, and the Spitfire seems completely oblivious to our presence, despite the fact that only a few seconds earlier I was shooting at him. Then I just level the wings and try to get the gun sight on him as best as I can. I'm not using tracers here, so I have to try and judge this as best I can, and then pulling the trigger through the aircraft, hits on the tail, hits on the engine, and then the third burst I think I missed. He went into a spin, which I didn't want to follow, and my decision then is just to get the nose up, convert that airspeed back into some altitude. I've got my wingman behind me. You can see one close in here. That's Kennedy. And the Spitfire is now miles away, returning back, it seems, to land. Decided not to follow him at all. He would be dragging us down towards the enemy airfields and the flak, and so we just reset, reformed the formation, and gained some height and some situational awareness, looking for some more bandits. Closing on another fight then, a couple of friendlies here, engaging a pair of Spitfires. There's a 109 going up over the top, and I think an Anton was heading away to the right. I can't quite remember. Maybe another 109 as well, but I've got a P51 now in front of me that's slightly damaged, a Spitfire trying to get on the 6 of that other 109, so I decided I would just pull in behind the trail of these two aircraft first. Getting nice and close on the Mustang, a few rounds out the front, hits on his canopy, hits behind, and he's pulling a little bit of G there, and his tail comes off. and that's the end of him. And then I punch up through the cloud in order to get clear, because I knew that other Spitfire was around, but I never found him again. I went up through the cloud here and disappeared from the combat area. Here we've got a situation where I'm diving in on a small script that's already underway. There's quite a low cloud base in this mission, so it was quite hard to find a space to dogfight above the ground but beneath the cloud. There are two 109s whipping past me on the left, which have just been engaged in a fight, and my first instinct was to try and ID them, so I flew up over the top and made an ID of those two 109s. And then my second idea was to try and ID the other aircraft which I'd seen in the neighborhood. I didn't spot that P-51 behind me till quite late. I did have an AI wingman with me, and I instructed him to engage bandits. I'm going to turn off the labels now. I can hardly see the P-51 behind me. If I zoom in slightly, he becomes more obvious. But I managed to drop flat and make a pretty rapid turn and force him into going sort of defensive. And he actually flew out underneath me. And then I was able to get on a 6 pretty easy by completing the turn. A few wild shots out in front of him, but I think I actually touched him with one of those hits. And because I'm not using tracer, he didn't really see the rounds coming. More deflection there, a couple more hits. A 109 flies in front and distracts him, so this is an opportunity for me to close and get some hits. He goes defensive for a second there, trying to force the overshoot. I pull the throttle right back and he hits the trees. I was awarded the kill for that one. It was more than a maneuver kill because I did actually get a couple of very small hits from those bursts that I fired a bit earlier on. But to be honest, most of that was probably a maneuver kill, and I think he just snatched at the controls when he looked behind and saw me and got himself into a spin, got slow, and was unable to recover the aircraft before he hit the trees. Here's a nice one where I was up at about 8,000 or so meters, and I spotted a contact well off to my left and underneath me, going the other way. You can see from the labels here that it's a Spitfire, but I didn't have an ID at this point. So I decided to go inverted and chop the throttle back. I'm doing 500 at this point, so not too fast. I zeroed the throttle, and my aim is just to roll onto the back of this guy. He's nicely silhouetted against the cloud there, so we can turn the labels off. Now at this point, I had no no elevator authority at this point right here. I was going too fast, so I had to trim back on the elevator. Unfortunately, using the trim gave me just that little bit of elevator that I needed, otherwise I would have just gone straight down. And then settling up behind this guy, throttling on now, and then lining up. He did turn there, but I don't think he saw me. Couple of bursts. The first one I panicked a little bit, I think, because I thought he'd seen me, and then I was able to correct my aim just as he leveled off. So that was a weird coincidence. I think he just maneuvered as I was closing on him, but I don't think he saw me. This is actually a few minutes later on the same sortie. I decided to head home. Plenty of fuel still in the tank, but I was running out of time, and I noticed, in addition to that message, I noticed that there's another aircraft underneath me, climbing up from below. So I thought, well, on the way home, I'll just roll left, I'll dive on this guy, and I'll see if I can get some hits on, and then I'll break away. So, similar to before, dropping the nose. Just bringing the throttle back then as I settle into this dive. I'm going to try and aim out in front of this Spitfire. So aiming out in front of him the whole time, then just getting the nose up. He's had his nose up for quite some time. I'm trying to get some shots away early, and then thud, something hit me. And he went up and behind. I have no idea if he hit me or I hit him. You can see he's wallowing about there, very low on energy and disappearing into the clouds. I decided to do the same, throttle up, full speed. It was a good decision to run because a second and third Spitfire had arrived and there was another P47 off to the west, so I would soon have been well outnumbered, and that's me running for the cover of that cloud and trying to get home. This is a slightly more interesting fight, I think, where we both seem to have spotted each other about the same time. At about 5,500 meters, I saw a P51 off to my left, and we actually went head on right at the beginning here, and I just decided to pull the nose up to avoid his incoming fire and try and get up into an early climbing turn. So you can see him disappearing around behind me there. And he's now behind me on the right. And at this point I decided that I probably didn't have the energy to complete the turn, so I thought I would actually run, so a little bit cowardly to begin with. And this cloud was right next to me at a really nice altitude, so I just dipped into this cloud, and he's now some ways behind me, but I can't see him obviously because I'm in the cloud. Now looking back there, you can see his icons, but the aircraft was invisible. So I was busy looking around behind me, trying to find the Bandit. It's about this time he pops up, and he hasn't followed me round in this turn yet. And he actually seems to be rocking his wings a little bit, so I figured he was looking for me. And now I've finally got altitude on him, and he appears to be unaware with respect to where I am. Now's the time to try and perhaps go aggressive. My airspeed's okay, I've got a reasonable amount of altitude, and so I start this very gentle left-hand turn to try and bring the aircraft round onto him. So he's still well behind me there. Just get that cockpit bar out the way. It looks like he's turned into me here, but he hasn't. He's actually turning away and going back to the north. So I'm pretty confident at this point that he's no longer got visual on me, and that's why I start bringing the nose around a bit quicker. And the Bandit is now going to be in front of me and below me, which he is, so I'm going to have to turn the labels on in order to be able to see him again here for the video. The Bandit is now left of my nose, moving left to right, a little bit lower, maybe 500 meters lower, and in a pretty good position for me to now be the aggressor. So I've turned the situation from one where it was pretty even to one where I was probably defensive, using the cloud and using a turn to get some separation, and now I can come back because I can see him and I don't think he can see me. Engine then, 1.42 ARTA, about as much as I can push it up here, no MW50 on this thing, and I'm just trying to stay fast and straight. There's the Bandit now possibly seeing me, so time to roll up. Really, really high angle, so he has to push the nose up, and then I'm going to roll down on him here and try and get him in the gun sight. And I have to pull the stick back pretty heavily, so I'm unable to get him in the gun sight. And I tried a bit of a snapshot, but that was pretty silly. Back on the throttle, and I'm unstable, but so is he, and almost messed that up. So we've definitely both seen each other now. He's underneath me, and I'm just throttle back, and we're doing a scissoring maneuver here. He flies in front of me, and I think I touched him there, but it didn't look like serious damage, and he just snapped at the controls for a fraction because I saw his roll rate go dramatically up. So that indicates to me that he's just having a little bit of handling problems. He pulls it around into another head-on, starts firing, and that's when I get some good hits on him. and I'm actually making him leak now. Now, I wasn't using tracers, so he doesn't have an indication of where my bullets are going. He did hit me, and my engine is slightly tapped. You can see my engine's just rocking a bit. But he's damaged now, and we'll see that damage in a minute as he starts diving away. There is a stream of fluid coming out the back. For some reason he tries an aggressive move again, but I just avoid his fire, keep the aeroplane moving fast. I can see the damage on his wing now, and we'll go around into a nice quick turn. So this is a bit of a one circle which I've managed to win, and I can use that now to get on a 6. Now he's in trouble. He's damaged. He's got a 109 on a 6 with a small height advantage and potentially a speed advantage. He's trying this left turn to see if he can outrate me, but if he looks back now, he'll realize that I am gaining on him in the turn. And this is about the point, I think, where he decides to wing over and dive. Down we go. So, throttle back for me. I don't want to get too fast in this dive. And I just let him slide out underneath the left there. So this is me trying not to overhaul him. 0 on the throttle. Time to go aggressive again, making sure I'm lagging well behind. I'm using the elevator trim here to get the nose up. I'm not pulling back on the stick. He's right in front of me, and this is where he panics. I'm going to zoom in so we can see what he's doing. There, you can see he suddenly flicks the aeroplane, and then he's snapping back on the controls. Very hard to see with this view. He's snapping back on the controls to try and correct the aeroplane, and he's got himself into a non-recoverable spin, and then he bails out just at the last second. So you can see here the moment where the P51 makes the little error. He goes into a left-hand bank with me on his long 6 and just flicks the aeroplane there. And at this point, I think he's still snatching at the controls to try and recover. He probably just should have gone hands off, feet off, and zeroed the throttle. There's no change in the engine, so he's still running a hot engine, and he can't recover the aeroplane. Here's a case where I'm flying along at low level, responding to a friendly who is calling out for assistance, being chased by a Bandit, and you can see the blue label right in front of me there. That's a friendly 109 with a Spitfire behind him. At this point I didn't realize there was another Spitfire off that way, but he was leaving the combat area, and I'm trying to get my friendly to just make a gentle right turn to bring that Spitfire in front of me so I can catch it. Unfortunately, you can see the cloud of dust up there. The friendly hit the ground in the middle of that chase scene that was playing out in front of me, so the Spitfire was then breaking off to the south, and I decided to try and get up underneath the Spit. The angle was actually quite good, and provided I was able to not hit a tree, I was thinking I could get underneath this guy. I had to just lift the nose to make a bit of a turn there, but by the end of the turn I'm about 500 meters behind and right underneath the Spitfire, which is pretty perfect situation. He is left righting a bit. I think he's checking his 6, but I don't know if he's checking right underneath his tail, and I want to get in just a little bit closer before I open up. So here we go, lining up the gun sight now. Bang, bang, bang. Lots of hits on his wing, on his fuselage. He pops the canopy, jumps out, and that's one less Spitfire to worry about. As soon as I've finished the climb there, getting the aircraft back into a diving attitude, checking my own 6, there's a parachute, and trying to get as low and fast as possible just in case that other Spitfire I saw shows up. In this case I managed to get away without being spotted. Here I am up at about 7,500 meters, and I spotted a P47, which you can see with the labels, down underneath my left wing, flying in the opposite direction at the perfect altitude for a bounce. As usual, the key here is not to roll over too early, because then the dive becomes too steep. So you kind of got to try and let them go past you, throttling back to 0 throttle, and then gently pulling the nose around to try and get that P47 out in front of me. If you pull the nose too early, you get unstable, and also then you might end up with him underneath your nose. We can turn those labels off now that we're getting a bit closer. And then I managed to settle underneath the P47 just about here, and he put his left wing down and started maneuvering slightly, and I was a bit worried then that he'd seen me, and it's possible he had. So I put some deflection in, trying to get a shot here as we went around the corner, and I think I actually might have got hits on his wing, because he pulled up pretty aggressively. And then we went 0 throttle, a sort of scissoring maneuver, and he went straight in front of my gun sight there. As we now go into a diving spiral, I'm trying to keep my throttle as low as possible so that I don't get too fast, but still enough on so that I can stay with him, and just trying to follow his moves with a bit of lag. Opportunity for a shot there and there, but I had too much deflection on, and then you can see I overshot. So I just got a little bit too greedy for a second, but fortunately the closure rate was so great and we were both rolling around so much that he was unable to quickly get a snapshot on me. So a bit of a mistake there that could have cost me. Fortunately, as it turned out, and possibly because of the damage I'd already inflicted, he was unable to strike back. At this point the Bandit is diving away, and I thought he was going to lead me back to their bases where the flak is pretty hot, so I broke off and started climbing away, and I found out a few minutes later that he had been seen going in by one of the guys I was flying with, so I claimed the P47 destroyed in that case. Just as the P47 was about to go into the cloud there, you can see the engine actually quit, and this pilot decided to try and glide down to make a crash landing on the ground. He's just emerging through the cloud here. So I was probably justified, I think, in breaking off when I did, given that this chap is in all likelihood not going to make it home. And we'll watch what happens here over the next minute or so, because there is a little twist in the tale of this story. After some gliding, this P47's about to land in a field, and then out of nowhere, this happens. A friendly 109 shows up and deprives me of my kill, and for that, somebody owes me a Weizen.